Dear Sarah, welcome to Lisbon and ISCTE-IUL. It will be a privilege for us to listen to you. Your research is very contemporary, provocative, and crossing several scientific areas. I'd like to thank DINÂMIA for the full support, particularly to Maria José and Bruno Vasconcelos. And I invite Helena to do the presentation of Professor Sarah and moderate the debate at the end. And thank you.
Thank you. Danielle would like to say something on behalf of New University of Lisbon?
Just a few words to thank Sarah. It's nice to meet you and your work. Just to say that the Instituto de História Contemporânea is always interested in this subject that has to do with the digital humanities. We are now had a research line in that subject, so it's perfectly clear the interest that your presentation here will be. So, welcome all, and it's always a pleasure to have something with a curricula so interesting as yours talking to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for being with us today. I'm sure you have lots of wonderful things to show us, because I've been following your work and it's really, really interesting. I'm just going to introduce Sarah, and after Sarah's presentation there will be a debate, and if anyone wants to ask any question in Portuguese, I'm happy to translate. Okay? Right, and I just would like to say a few words about the subject of study that's going to be discussed here today, just quickly, because the stage belongs to Sarah. As we all know, today the role and potentialities of the use of digital technologies in the study, preservation and dissemination of cultural heritage is of paramount importance. The multidisciplinary approach that they afford is changing scientific research and creativity practices and strengthening their interconnection. We are therefore developing new ways of viewing the past and embodying it in the present, and we're going to be able to see it here with Sarah's presentation. So Professor Sarah Kenderdine is the Deputy Director of the National Institute of Experimental Arts, Australia, and Director of the iGLAM Lab, Laboratory for Innovation in Galleries, Libraries, Archives and Museums. She has widely researched in the context of breakthrough interactive and immersive experience for galleries and museums, especially in the realms of interactive cinema, augmented reality and embodied narrative. In 2013, she received the International Council of Museums Award, Australia, the Australian Arts in Asian Innovation Award, and the Digital Heritage International Heritage International Congress and IMRA Foundation Fellowship. Professor Sarah Kenderdine is also the author of several works on the subject. And I'll just give the stage to you now.
Can you all see on the side there? Okay, thank you very much for the invitation to speak here, to Daniel, to Paula, and to Helena. It's a great pleasure. So, since the heady days of the internet, when it became a vital source for museums traditional boundaries have been thrown wide open, and new media technologies are expanding our collecting policies, renewing our curatorial visions, and importantly, refreshing our relationship with audiences. As the CEO of Intel, Brian Krasnick, said last year in 2004, we're in the midst of a transformation from a world of screens and devices to a world of immersive experiences. The movie that you're looking at on the screen is a work by the media artist Jeffrey Shaw, and it predates Krasnick's statement by over 23 years. It's developed for a VR cave, which is stereo projection on the floor and 3 walls. And in this kind of work, we see how artistic experiments actually predate and often drive technological innovation. In this work, the life-size puppet is used to manipulate all of the graphics on the screen. So there are potentiometers in all of the joints of the puppet. When you close the puppet's eyes, you move between different worlds. And I use this really to say that we are, I guess, gazing through a lens which has been continuously refined over many centuries even, and that finding presence in virtual environments means having traversed the histories of technological immersion. So this is the generations of O-ramas and sensораmas and all manner of optical devices. These early museographic forms were all part of the development of architectonic spaces whose images and relationships excited a private public curiosity and opened for the public into new worlds of knowledge. Stephen Ottoman claimed the panorama as the first true mass medium. In current media praxis, the re-emergence of the panoramic scheme as a new image vogue is based on the desire to design virtual spaces and places that can be inhabited by the viewer, maximizing a sense of immersion and ultimately presence. This obsession for the encompassing view has been brought to the fever pitch by the domestication of head-mounted displays in such technologies as the Oculus VR. The panorama through time reveals itself as a panoramic space, and it's persistent throughout media history. This is the Kaiser panorama. It was developed by August Fuhrmann in the late 19th century, and he was able to sell over 250 of these distributed throughout Europe. It's a kind of virtual travel machine. It's rotating stereo slides inside this enclosure, and everyone is looking in to see these worlds. And as far as the ramas go, there's been an enormous array of developments. This is just a few of the different technologies developed in the panoramic or immersive scheme. The visual cultural theorist Jonathan Crary, in his analysis of 19th century ocular devices and modernity, observed the techniques of the observer involved an array of perceptual and spatial expansions. He noted that particular ways of seeing were more successful than others, and for him, the optical devices that survived through time were the ones that combined 2 attributes. The first, that they were sufficiently phantasmagoric, meaning that they had the capacity to create illusion and to conceal the process of production. And secondly, that these devices were the ones that were able to create a visual experience that presupposes the body as immobile and passive. So what we see now in the emergence of immersive and interactive visualization environments is really the greatest challenge to this notion of the passive body since the invention of the roller coaster. The research that I'm doing is located or supported by 4 organizations. The iCinema Research Centre in Sydney. It's a Centre for Interactive Cinema Research. the Applied Laboratory for Interactive Visualization and Embodiment, located at the Hong Kong Science Park in Hong Kong, and I'm Director of Research at this organization. The ZKM Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe in Germany, and Museum Victoria in Melbourne, where I also hold a position. So in total, we work across about 10 large-scale immersive environments. Many of them are 3D, so 5 of them are stereoscopic 3D. And they offer strategies for multi-sensory engagement and give us powerful ways to reformulate narrative in a digital context. And they emphasize human-to-human as well as human-to-machine interaction. And so my talk today is focused on a series of these experimental interfaces for museums that transform cultural heritage data, allowing audiences to rediscover and reinvent ancient cities, museological collections, and cultural practices. So digital imaging technologies have become vital tools for us to be able to create futures from the past. While we know politically motivated destruction has been with us for thousands of years and continues rampantly today, climate change catastrophes are increasing at alarming rates. Natural disasters wreak havoc, and mass tourism threatens to engulf those places that we hold most dear. Today, 3D technologies provide us with exceptionally high-resolution pictures of the world. Laser scanning, for example, collects billions of points to represent places, such as these heads at Mount Rushmore, which were laser scanned by the Scottish 10. We can create precious objects in 3D and peer inside to see what was previously unseen. And we can capture art in a way that allows us to zoom into the tiniest brushstroke and reveal more than the naked eye can see. And these new imaging technologies alone are really not enough, however, to bring objects and places to life in ways that are profound and unforgettable. So it's not just about technology, it's about how you can create narrative experience with this material. So it's about creating narratives of engagement that's at the heart of the research that we're undertaking. The talk is divided into 6 areas, and this one is about inhabiting cultural landscapes. We begin in the Dongguan Caves in the Gobi Desert of northernmost China. This is at the nexus of the Silk Road. It's 492 caves, which is carved into the escarpment. It's a World Heritage Site. Inside these caves are 45,000 square meters of mural paintings and over 2,500 stucco statues. They're crafted by Buddhist monks over the period of 1,000 years, and like this sublime art treasury is like nothing else in the Chinese Buddhist world. It's under the jurisdiction of the Dongguan Academy, the Chinese government, and they have 600 full-time employees. And if you compare this to almost all other World Heritage sites, it's a phenomenal number of full-time staff. The site is extremely important for also the scroll documents that were found there. This includes the oldest book in the world, the Diamond Sutra, and as you'll see at the bottom here, the earliest known constellation, the depiction of the constellations of the Northern Hemisphere. All of this material was stolen or exported from China by explorer archaeologists. This is Pelio in the Library Cave, and Oral Stein was one of the other archaeologists working in that area. This material ended up split up between 18 countries. It's now being digitized under the auspices of the British Library with the International Dongguan Project, and they're able to, digitally bring this huge reservoir of material back together. So the caves are under serious threat from rising humidity. This is largely caused at the moment by rising tourism. And most of the paint is beginning to flake off the walls. So they're doing a massive preservation effort. There are between 60 and 90 full-time photographers working at Dongguan. They camera array photograph every cave and they stitch the data together. It takes about 3 months to photograph a single cave, and they laser scan also. They don't do these two things together, which is a bit problematic, but we took the laser scan from cave 220 and we added the textures on top, and we put it into our 360-degree 3D system. This is 10 meters across and 4.5 meters high, and it allows visitors a one-to-one scale experience of this cave. So it begins with a very simple cave browser of significant caves at Dongguan. And we enter into cave 220. We're simulating here what it's like to be there at Dongguan now, because if you visit, you're with 60 people, one guide with an LED torch, so you in fact don't see very much at all. Because it's a digital cave, it can be navigated. We created a high-resolution magnifying glass that allows you to examine the murals in great detail. This is a sutra of the medicine Buddhas on the north wall of the cave. Using the pigment studies at Dongguan, some of the murals were recolored to be as close to what is archaeologically known as the original color. We modeled many of the elements in the painting in 3D, including the instruments of 32 musicians that appear in the painting. And we filmed Beijing Academy dancers dancing the Dongguan dance to represent the 4 dancers that are in the painting on the north wall. So really it was a prototype project to look at different strategies of how you could interpret mural paintings across 492 caves. And it was a very modest amount of funding. We just worked with students, and it was about $50,000 in total. It's now been seen by about 600,000 people, and the cave is permanently closed. So it's had a really huge uptake and is endlessly on tour around the world at the moment. Unfortunately, nobody's giving us any money to make more caves, but anyway, this seems to be good enough. It went to the Freer Sackler in Washington at the Smithsonian's, and one of the critics said, "At last we have a virtual reality system worthy of inclusion in a museum devoted to the real stuff of art." And this is quite important because, as you may be aware, introducing virtual reality into museums is one of a really fundamental challenge. The museums have kind of dealt with websites and they understand they've got to have them, but having 3D high-fidelity objects on the museum floor is really the last frontier. And so this critic actually recognized this tension and was able to say this because we have increasing fidelity, and it's only recently that a new media or multimedia of this type has found its way into the galleries, and it has a really profound role to play. I just received a grant in Hong Kong, or we received a grant in Hong Kong to teach distributed Silk Road studies between Sydney and Hong Kong. And this is a $2.2 million Australian dollar grant to deal with real-time environments and linking them up and teaching new pedagogy. We took the same data set of this cave and we printed on the walls of this exhibition booth, again at one-to-one scale. And this is originally for Art Basel in Hong Kong, and then this image is from the Shanghai Biennial. And visitors are walking around inside the space at one-to-one scale again, and they have essentially windows on the world, which are these mobile tablets looking at these exceptionally high-resolution images. You can see the ceiling, which you can't see in the so well in the other cave. What's important about it is it's highly social. So single user interface, multi-spectator is a very, very powerful paradigm for museums, which is often forgotten in the rush to technology. Everybody thinks that everyone's got to have their own device, but in fact that's why not. It's also a multi-generational interface, so from young kids to middle-aged ladies, a grandmother, grandchild, grandmother abandons a grandchild. And the other important phenomenon that it exhibits is this one of virtual tourism. So the wife has her iPad from her handbag and she's filming her husband's experience. The third installation, same data set, is a permanent one in Henquin in China. So this is a 220-degree screen. It's 5 meters high. It's very high resolution. And I just show a bit of video here because any member of the public drives this application themselves using a little interface. And it was kind of obligatory to do the head-mounted display version, even though it's lower resolution. The model was then optimized to about 3 million polygons. And in this Oculus application, the computer's actually in a backpack. And so we're able to track the visitor walking around the space at 1-to-1 scale. It also uses a leap motion to track the visitor. And so you can put your body into the virtual world. This helps give scale. You don't get any motion sickness because in fact you are walking around. So this was an installation just done at a trade show in San Francisco for Autodesk. It's not a museum application because it's too high maintenance, hygiene issues, etc., etc. But anyway, she's walking around. You're looking at her point of view on the big screen. Those are her kids. They've done this before. And they're also looking at the computer that's showing her point of view. If she walks too far to the edge, the cave becomes all blurry, so she will back off. She's got noise-cancelling headphones on, so she's completely isolated. She's in a Buddhist chant there. It's almost like 101 things to do with one data set, because now I'm going to do an installation in September for the World Economic Forum, and the cave is going into a full dome, which is what they wanted. You can see how high maintenance it is for a museum context. Need an operator. So moving from China to India, this is an artwork we created in 2006, which subsequently toured the world. It was commissioned for France-India Year. Hampi is both a monumental World Heritage site and a vibrant centre for contemporary pilgrimage. And the artwork recombines 25 square kilometres of this extraordinary terrain. So we're using quite a rare camera here. It takes a left and a right eye film image. There are only 4 cameras like this in the world, and we own 2 of them, because, in fact, it was a commercial failure because nobody wants stereographic panoramas, in fact, because nobody has any screens to put them on. But anyway, it's a beautiful camera, writing to film. And it allows us to create this navigable panoramic world. We use ambisonic sound recording for like a 3D architecture of sound, motion capture for animation. And it's staged in the place platform, so it's a different platform, and it has a motorized platform at the middle that allows you to rotate a field of view, about a 100-degree field of view in 360 degrees. It's passive stereo. And there are about 25 to 30 people in the room, but again, a single user, multi-spectator scenario, and you can navigate this virtual world. Panoramas, when you go inside, are 1-to-1 scale. You can speak into a microphone, which is mounted on the platform, which allows you to release Sanskrit text in the world coming from chapter 13 and 37 of the Ramayana, because Hampi is said to be the home of the monkeys from the Ramayana. And then some of these panoramas are augmented with computer graphics. These were done by Indian animators and artists. We trained them in stereographic animation. It was the first 3D animation ever done in India. And the music that you can hear comes from Dr. L. Subramaniam, who's a Carnatic violin superstar. So that work toured all over the world and then was brought back to the site. So adjacent to the site, a cultural precinct was built. It contains dance pavilions and artist residency studios, and the museum here, which I did, which was, it's really the archaeological imaginary, 9-meter light table, a hang of photographs by John Gollings, who's quite a famous Australian architectural photographer. An interactive archive. It's very low-tech. It's the archive of George Michel and John Fritz, the two principal archaeologists working at this site also for about 30 years, and scanned their archive, which was largely to do with archaeological process rather than the finished products. And you're scanning the barcodes on, like in a supermarket, and just scan it, and you get high-resolution images on the wall with labels in 3 languages. So it's in Hindi, Kannada, and English. And there are several other rooms. These images are from the launch of this particular museum. I'll just flick through them. This is Hanuman. He grew up at Hampi. This importance of the Ramayana myth. And this is Lakshmi, the temple elephant. She also came from Hampi. Lots of politicians rocked up, lots of politicians I didn't know about rocked up. And this is Lakshmi in Hampi Bazaar. So this is the marriage of Pampa and Virupaksha. And they drag these big wooden chariots up and down the bazaar. And that's what Lakshmi is typically doing, is blessing pilgrims, in fact. She's about 28 years old. And I show this video because as we were building the museum, the Archaeological Survey of India were systematically destroying every single temporary structure on the site. So this created 5,000 refugees overnight, and really, despite the management plan, flew in the face of everything to do with intangible heritage in favor of the tangible heritage, which is the built. So this was the barber shop when I first started working there, and this is the barber shop today. So it's a complete devastation of the community and the people that provide the support for those 60,000 pilgrims who come into town. This is a holy man cleaning up after a puja on a Shiva Linga, and it really, I show this image because it represents for me the care of the material world, but the material world is, how should we say, steeped or is only made alive by the intangible heritage, and so that you need to preserve both and respect both. Anyway, that museum has been very successful, and we're now going to make a new museum in Bangalore, and I call it the Place Karnataka Museum, but it will also be the State Museum, so it has a collection, and we'll be dealing with lots and lots of sites and also lots of intangible heritage in that museum. Also in India, this is the Prince of Wales Museum in Mumbai, and we shot 160 gigapixel images there in Mumbai last year. This is India Gate. This is the new airport, Terminal 3, the Bauji Lad Museum. So many, many, many images, and these will be projected up into the ceiling of the museum. It's a 60-foot diameter dome. And 3 floors below, there's a little mirror which reflects what's above you. So it's like a tunnel in time and space. This is just an animation which shows you what the actual installation will be. It won't be installed until December this year. So these are cheesy video transitions as opposed to algorithmically generated transitions. We have just taking receipt of a 6-meter 4K full dome, so this is very, very high resolution, but traveling dome. So I put together a grant with, it's got 15 partners, including 5 museums, to which this will tour around Australia and internationally to show experimental full dome work. One of the museum partners is the National Museum of Australia, and we're creating this work, which is, this is a 12-meter dome, also with a mirror on the floor. That means you're suspended between the 2 hemispheres. It's to do with indigenous song lines. This is a sort of narrative of moving through the landscape, and so that's what it depicts. This is dynamic pathways to do with both moving through the desert and also clan relationships. And this was produced just so the museum had I guess, a repertoire to understand what is possible in such an environment. So these are satellite images. They're all of the western desert of Australia. That was a piece of art. And it will include the paintings of the Matu ladies, and they depict this songline in their paintings. To do this kind of work, obviously we're capturing 7K spherical video and doing a lot of high-resolution scanning of artworks. And the last bit of this schematic is dynamic paintings, and this is really, it's pretty experimental, but this is the idea that the Matu ladies will actually be painting assets which are then driven by an algorithm which will recombine those, which is much more akin to the oral history and the retelling of this particular songline. I think I've read about 32 different versions, and so that is the intention, is that we will create this, I guess, slightly varying algorithm which will bring this songline together in a myriad of ways. So moving from landscapes to objects, this is an old work also by Geoffrey Shaw, and it's the golden calf. So it's the ultimate virtual object. It uses the golden cow from Apple. It was the first kind of VR model, and you're using this tablet to see this golden calf, which doesn't exist, standing on that plinth. Every time it's installed, a panorama is taken, so the reflection map on the surface of the calf is true to the location that you're in. And what you see in museums now is a complete, I guess, revival of these kind of old 1990s artistic experiments. So Museum Victoria, my museum, this is a room with 1,000 stuffed animals, and we've created these panoramic navigators that allow you to pan around in the space, and you're looking at any one of those objects, and you're able to bring up an object movie of that creature, 3D movie, and you're also able to look at video material of these creatures in the wild as they're running around. So that's the object movie. You can download everything to your phone, and they're really a sort of industrial build, so they can sustain the large visitation of the gallery. And this is at ZKM, an application done by Bernd Lintemann, and with this one, he took panoramas, or this is exhibition to do with cars. The cars came from different museums throughout Europe, and the tablet is used to show that car in its original location, actually original museum, originating museum. And if you're not looking at cars and you just happen to look at the ceiling, then what you're looking at is real-time traffic flows around Karlsruhe. So it looks like a kind of intestine, but in fact it's real-time traffic flow. This is a portion of the 18-meter scroll painting Pacifying of the South China Sea Pirates. This is the item in the Hong Kong Maritime Museum, and it tells of the bloody encounters between government forces and pirates in the late 1800s in the South China Sea. So we scanned this at 1,200 dpi, so it's 55 centimeters wide, 18 meters long. Allows you to zoom in more than you can see with your naked eye. The museum bought a 360 system, which is inside there. And we staged an interactive sea mist, which is mentioned in some of the texts related to this scroll, and 55 animated events. So the animations are very straightforward. Oh, we'll go back. These animations are very straightforward. Yeah, so like 2D style of animation. But mostly it's chopping people's heads off and blowing them up, this whole thing. And there are 20 scenes in the painting, and the sea mists open and close, and these events play out. So there should be some audio with this. And then the sea mists close, and the scroll is rotating. So it's kind of like revealing the scroll in a traditional sense, while highlighting particular elements.
The pirates are captured.
We took the same data and right next to the real scroll, so the real scroll is behind the user of this interface. It's a 4K screen and it's moving up and down a light box. It's an LED array, and this allows a visitor to use a tablet and to navigate inside this high-resolution image. It's augmented with about 197 texts coming from 2 historic documents that talk about this particular scroll and the characters that are depicted in it. So it's a real-time application, and then you can move the scroll up and move the 4K screen up and down as well. So there's a bit of video, yeah. So that's just artifacts from the video camera on the LED. It doesn't exist in reality. And we run a scanning lab in Sydney, Lux Lab, that does a lot of this high-resolution scanning, running workshops and things. We recently scanned this for the State Library of New South Wales in Sydney. It's about 6 meters long, and it's one of the original etchings done by Henry Barker in 1853 for Robert Barker's panorama in Leicester Square. So it's a really fabulous document drawn from Galata Tower in Taksim in Istanbul. And this work is included just as an animatic here. It's for a show that's going around next year, which I'll show you. So it just uses a similar kind of augmented reality scenario, because we will be able to shoot a gigapixel image from Galata Tower at exactly the same location. You couldn't do this at most cities in the world because they've changed so much over time, but Istanbul still has many of its very iconic features visible. Maybe you could do it in Lisbon, I'm not sure. And on the floor will be printed this key to that particular work. Oh, I'll just keep going. So we have a lot of software that deals with very seamless zooming in. So this is a 25 gigabyte image, and you can seamlessly get to that point in this kind of software environment on a 4K or even 8K screen. And we're dealing also with a lot of database materials. So this is a database we created ourselves. It's 24 hours of free-to-air broadcast television footage on Australian TV, so they just have 6 channels. And it was analysed by software. Every time there was a camera angle change in the movie, a cut was made, so we ended up with a database of 25,000 clips. Each one of these was hand-tagged. We hired 4 guys to do this. Took them about 3 weeks. They're looking at a 4-second clip, and they're adding metadata like emotion, expression, physicality, speed, scene structure, and more obvious things like gender and things like that, and color. So now we stream
Can I help? You could marry this man.
about 500 simultaneous streams of video to the AV system. So it's 2D data distributed in 3D space. And you're able to operate on the database. So if you click on any image, it will go into the data set. It will bring everything that's semantically most similar to one side of the screen, and everything that's most dissimilar is behind you. It's got a whole bunch of interfaces. This is just one of them. You're able to bring up the metadata tags and tag your own search. So I think he's going to click on color, which is a really obvious one, and click on a fiery red thing, and you'll see this, how it works. It brings all the fiery red stuff to one side, and all the black and white images are behind you. It's actually based on luminosity, not color. But anyway. You're able to click on any video and play the whole video through to the end in a loop, and every other video in the place will freeze. So in fact, that's when we break copyright, but that's another story. And you can add clips together, so you're recombining the narratives from different movies, and then you're able to play that your own movie through your recombined or your mashed up movie.
Right now.
Yeah, and they're asking the exact same question.
And addressing the problem that at most major museums only a fraction of the collection's on display. So at the Smithsonian in Washington, it's 2%. At the British Museum, it's 0.4% of the collection's on display. At my museum in Melbourne, it's 0.8. So very little on display. So we created this data browser for Museum Victoria, which is 100,000 objects from the collection. They own a 360 3D system. It's in the museum permanently. And this is distributed across 18 themes, and it connects all the stuff together using the metadata from the content management system. What's important about this work is it's a 15-minute export from the system. So we had the data very, very, very quickly, which, if you've got good data, you can do anything. It creates a Wordle from the content management description. You can zoom into the images. You can access the original record. And then from each object, it links off to different thematic collections using the metadata. Each theme has a different soundscape, and that is made up from audio that's in the collection of the museum. Museum Victoria's got 16 million objects. So like all of these systems, there are about 30 people or even more can fit inside at any one time, but it's a single user. We just film them with nobody in there because otherwise you can't see anything. Another work which was really in the digital humanities sphere, this is a work we've started with Professor Lou Lancaster from Berkeley University. This is a Tripitaka Koreana. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it contains 88,000 wooden plates which inscribes the Buddhist canon on them, and there are 50 million characters in the canon. So Professor Lancaster, who's from Berkeley, he encoded this whole thing. Took about 30 years, and he created a digital canon. But he realized that when he was searching the canon, that really it wasn't improving his scholarship in any way. So he thought, how can I change this? And he changed it by abstracting each character to a blue dot. So it's an abstract representation. Each blue dot has metadata associated with it that describes where it is in the canon, what it actually means, and stuff like that. And but the way that they display it is on a small, desktop screen, and they really only see a fraction of this 50 million character data set. So what he really wants is a complete 360-degree 3D system, which is really the equivalent of unlimited screen real estate. And so these are early images of this abstract and also close-up reading. So he's really only interested in the abstract, but we thought we were interested in also being able to read the text for that project. We're also harnessing online data sets because there's been such an investment in digital data online and bringing it inside the museum. So this is a work by Bernd Lintemann from ZKM. Yep. Yep. Not sure why it's not playing. There we go. And he's harvested Wikipedia, and he's using a visual browsing metaphor to then bring up the information that's associated. So it's like a reversed paradigm, and it breaks down the sort of flat HTML world that many of us are living in. And for Europeana, we built this, which is done for their World War I database. Europeana, if you don't know, is the largest cultural portal in the world. They've got 27 million objects online. For their World War I material, they crowdsourced it. So they're driving around in Europe, and people are coming out of their houses, and they digitize and ingest this material, and it appears on the website. So it's great material. It's filled with propaganda, great artworks, mostly drawn in the trenches, the sort of icons of human tragedy and prosthetic devices, the lost loves and their reunions, poignant reunion. This is also miracles. This guy was lying with the Bible on his heart, and the bullet went into the Bible, but he was saved. So there are great stories within the data set, and the Europeana curators wanted to highlight those stories to start with. So it's staged on a 9-meter screen, and 18 stories were chosen by the curators. And it's very simple. It's a 12,000 euro work. You click on any image, and it generates all the images that are associated with that object, and then it generates the metadata that's associated. And once you start clicking on metadata tags, you're basically traversing this data set in different ways. So really it's just a reformulation of the web page using extant data. We don't do anything to it. This particular version that you're looking at was the first version that was rear projected. It's now front projected, so you don't get that stripe in the middle. Navigating time and space. This is a series of linear navigators. This is a time navigation, so it's a whole history of artworks done at the ZKM. So as you're moving the screen along, you're actually traveling through time, and you're able to access every one of the exhibitions at the ZKM. There's a little bit of movie and some information. This is Chris Ziegler did this one, and it's a spatial navigator. So it's traveling across Route 66, so from LA to Chicago to LA, or LA to Chicago. And he took film all the way along and also photographs. And as you stop, you access these little vignettes.
And at the time when it got through here, and was paved, then it began to be traveled, and the travel.
And we'll also do a similar one with this scroll. This is for this upcoming exhibition that I'll show you a movie of at the end. That really is two screens are moving up and down this 18-meter scroll painting at 1:1 scale, and you're able to access the animations that you saw before. Every time your screen stops, it will stop and generate one of these little vignettes. That one. We're also dealing with lots of intangible heritage, and it's obviously much more complex in terms of documentation, how you represent and also potentially archive things that are living. So we're doing this Hong Kong Kung Fu project. This is for all the South Chinese masters that exist in Hong Kong. As you're probably aware, because of the difficulties in China, most of the practitioners, religious people, etc., move to Hong Kong. It's a vast reservoir of Chinese intangible heritage existing in Hong Kong currently. So we're putting them in the mocap studio and documenting them in every possible way. This is our Kickstarter video. Turns out it was a very expensive project, data cleanup.
As Hong Kong has been a relatively
This is
stable
Hing
society
Chao,
and did
he's
not
the
experience
co-director of the project.
political and social interruptions that mainland
And he's
China
a
has
Kung Fu
experienced in the course of
practitioner and
20th
really the
century,
advocate
particularly
and
the
originator
Cultural
of this
Revolution.
project.
The continuation of traditional Chinese martial arts practice is better than in Hong Kong than in mainland China in respect of southern Chinese martial arts, where important masters such as Wang Feihong and Lam Sai-wei migrated to Hong Kong in the early part of the 20th century.
And it just talks about the mocap stuff. So the first of these works are going to be in a machine called Reactor, where you're able to walk around and look in at this mocap data at 1:1 scale. And it's dealing really with different forms of annotation. So this is basic, this is left hand, right hand, left foot, right foot, and the dantian point. But these will then be augmented with physical data. So it's really, these are motion over time studies, and will be used essentially for novel ways of teaching Kung Fu. We work a lot with theatre directors and choreographers, so this is one work that will show this same machine that I'm talking about. This is Saburo Toshigawa, he's a Japanese choreographer, and we've filmed them from 6 points of view in stereo, so they're dancing on a stage, that's the machine, and you can see the rig over there. And it's played back, rear projected onto these stereo screens. Because it's shot in 3D, the limbs will move in and out of the screen into negative and positive parallax. And you're able to see the performance from all sides. I've got a wee bit of installation video. It's hard to film because it's always so dark. And it's in 3D. It premiered in Shanghai. And another important project is Confucian Rights. So this is the Book of Li. We're doing this together with Tsinghua University and Professor Pang. And this is really involving a lot of very high-level Chinese scholars in the research of the costumes and the performance of the rites. There's been a lot of research done on Confucian philosophy, but almost nothing exists on the actual practice. And so these are reenacted practices. And what happens is they do a lot of research in China, they make all the costumes, and then they fly all the actors and the costumes down. So all these road cases arrive in Hong Kong, and we film them in every possible way. And this is the capping ceremony. So we just film it like this, it's sort of blank studio, and then we remove the background and rebuild what is potentially the temple in which it was done. It's quite schematic, it's very stylized, and it's very, very didactic. The website has a lot of drop-down boxes so that you can describe and drill into any one of these rites. So we recently installed this in the China Exchange in London, which just opened, and it's a 3-screen
Main
video.
family members are present. Through a calculation with his set of yarrow herb stalks, the diviner predicts the auspicious date in accordance with the Book of Changes, known in Chinese as the I Ching. After ascertaining the day, the host, usually the young man's father, visits the houses of the guests to invite them to the capping ceremony. This etiquette is called requesting the guests. The principal guest is also selected among the invited guests by the process of divining with yarrow herb stalks.
We're also looking at the reformulation of texts. So this is Wang Dongling. He's an action calligrapher in China, and he painted a banner for our building. He's one of the top 10 calligraphers in China. Just got a GoPro on the brush so you can see the point of view of the brush. This is a 30-meter banner for the atrium of the building. And in Sydney, we just made him this rig where he's going to write every single Chinese character, so, you know, about 4,000 of them. And they're being filmed from underneath. And so this is the uncleaned up data. And on the side, you can see, the other side, you can see the cleaned up data. And this will be used to make an app so that when you send your text messages in Chinese, you can send them in the calligraphy of a famous calligrapher. So we'll all get fabulously rich, I hope, from that. This is poetry. So we filmed Edwin Thumbu 30 times. It's really in the tradition of Ollie Poe. And it's a polyvocal reading of his original oeuvre. So it's staged in the 360 system, 30 3D videos. It's all life-size. And inside, you've got just a microphone, and you're able to move at will between his different poems. So you're recombining or creating a new poem.
O Father of Light, for me to choose, you grimaced. For instance, most.
And Unmakeable Love, this is also for the reactor system. It's based on the Samuel Beckett piece of prose called The Lost Ones, and he described 200 people incarcerated in a cylinder as a kind of systematic madness, or as one theorist described, a disembodied artificial intelligence. So because this text is so precise, we're able to write an algorithm which drives these characters. They're half life size, uses 350 motion capture sequences that are strung together using a games engine. And visitors are revealing this world using these interactive torches. It has another feature. There's a video camera capturing the torch user, so that's me on one side, that's Jeffrey on the other. other side of the machine, but if my torch beam peers across the world, I can actually see him standing on the other side of the machine in real time. And so this is kind of mixed reality that makes people aware that not only are they peering, but they are being peered at. We also work on evaluation because it's important to know why these experiences are powerful. And we've developed this app called I Show You. I've got a copy of it here for iPad mini. And basically, it allows us to, or the visitor, to record their experiences. So we're looking at the embodied experience, we're looking at socialization, and we're looking at learning. All the data is going in real time over the internet, and it's aggregated and visualized. So anybody can look in, really, and get a pulse of the space inside the museum. It started where we were giving people blank pictures of their body, and they were able to draw on them. And now we just use these screens. So there's all sorts of interfaces, drag and drop, whatever. Every time you push next, it's uploaded to the internet. This is a screen to do with levels of comfort, so that's very comfortable, less comfortable, more very uncomfortable. You can draw on your body. You can leave audio recordings, which are then analyzed. We do speech to text and then text analytics to try and create a lexicon of museum experience. And it's possible that you could actually do it in real time in the galleries so that the visitors' responses would be aggregated and recorded inside the gallery. That's an ongoing project, and many museums log on, they have their own account, they make their own questions. This is the Atlas of Maritime Buddhism. It's a project that we're just hopefully beginning, subject to a favorable grant review. It's about the spread of Buddhism from South India through to up into China and down into Korea and Japan. So we're just dealing with the right-hand side of the map, not the left at the moment, and it's the blue. So it's a counter story to the overland Silk Route. It's very topical because, of course, China is reviving the maritime Silk Route and the overland Silk Road in a multi-billion RMB expansion. Our work is based on about 30 locations and lots of archaeological material. And the challenge is really to take these different types of material and create a coherent experience. So we start with some kind of navigable world map, which is populated with significant locations throughout that region. And then you'd enter inside stereographic panoramas, as you saw before in Place Humpy, and you can navigate that way too, but then these would be augmented with computer graphics and the database, rather, of materials coming to support the narrative for that particular location. It may be a whole region that this material comes from, because it's very scattered, it's a very fragmentary data set. And it will premiere in China at the Maritime Silk Route Museum. It will go to the Hong Kong Maritime Museum, the Sydney Maritime Museum. And I'll just leave you with this. It should start. It's a, it won't start. I'll have to find it. That's an image. But we can take questions because I'll just show you this movie. Which is upcoming, premiering at Museum Victoria. And it's probably the largest single show that we've done. Yeah. Whoops. It's bigger than the screen. Can't see my cursor. Anyway, you're getting the idea. So it's 10 large-scale machines. This is a wayfinding device in the middle. And there are 20 pieces of content And it's really addressing the heritage at risk and new modalities of seeing. Many of the works that you've seen, plus a bunch more, are included in this video. But anyway, we could take questions if you like. It will just go through many of the works that we already saw. And I'll try and get it on the screen at the right scale. I'll try and redo that. I'll just get this movie going. Dim the lights? It's okay, yeah. So that's the overall layout. This is the touring hall at Museum Victoria. So that's why the architecture looks like that. And in this work, visitors are wearing a lapel with very, very precise speakers that address only their ears. So it's a new mode of I guess, audio guide for a museum, which allows people to talk to their friends, but also to get the appropriate sounds related to these works, and they're all real-time works, so it has to connect to the sound server for each system. So yeah, that's it. We can take questions anytime. Oh, I'm fine. Yeah, yeah. Because I can go to anything if anybody.
You want me to hold that so I can?
It's on.
Okay, thank
I think. If it's warmed up yet. It's on.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sarah, for this fascinating talk. We have seen here a multitude of projects in different historical and geographical contexts. And some projects that we can experience in the physical framework of the museum, and others that we can connect through the internet. I don't know if there's... Well, okay, we'll start with you. Okay, just a moment.
Thank you very much. Well, it's connected to what we're talking. That I mean, do you have several projects that the project is in the museum, but even in that occasion, the project is not in the heritage space or involved with the physical objects.
I think I know.
As long as I observed, every projects are quite isolated from the museum heritage. So my question is how do you manage that intersection between the heritage is always distant and virtual, or you can have more mixed approach?
So some of these works show in conjunction with objects, yeah? So, for instance, the Donghuan show, it shows in conjunction, for instance, in a few months, with a Tang object show, Chinese Tang artwork. So, and this is a digital work placed inside the gallery which has objects all around it, and it's considered another object. Yeah. And you're right that these works are not on site, but some of them are adjacent to the site. So, for instance, Place Hampi is right next to the World Heritage Site, so it's in country India, but it's a high-end kind of VR experience. And it allows people to visit many of the locations they will never get to if they go to Hampi. We've got another work in Rajasthan which I didn't show you, and it's embedded in the site. It's a fort in Rajasthan. And it's really just, it's spherical panoramas. It's a 2D big-scale browser. And that shows all the shrines and things that you're not allowed to go and see as a visitor. So it has that kind of augmenting of the real experience as well. So we can do both. And it really, the other thing that's crucial is that museums are only just getting to that point. My main conversation with a museum director will be, this stuff is too spectacular, we can't have it in our museum because people won't look at the real object. And it's not something that I agree with, yeah. But that's often the response that I get. So they're busy doing, you know, the web, because they don't have to see it in conjunction with the real thing. The web is purely digital, and it doesn't have to make that, it doesn't create that tension for them, that the digital is almost too spectacular. But then other directors recognize that it allows you to go to places that you will never be able to go to because they're closed to the public. Humans are destroying them, so they've been closed. Or, you know, they're on the other side of the world normally. And so it has a very, very powerful role inside the gallery with real objects. And I think that recognition is coming, yeah. We have lots of machines that are permanently in museums, so they have objects all around them, but they're different types, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's
Hi.
Helena. I'm actually Australian as well, and
Oh.
Portuguese, so it's nice to have somebody from Australia showing the work, and it's just incredible what you've been able to put together and implement it on the terrain, which is one of the, I think, the difficulties, and I've been living in Portugal for quite a while and actually attending a couple of conferences in Europe and speaking to a lot of people in the museum sector. And the problem is implementing, and as you were saying,
sure.
a lot of the directors, either it's they want to show the object, that's their main objective, and find that technology is not that important. But then, I mean, you're sharing your you know, with the work that you've just presented, you know, there are places you'll never get to, and I think digital heritage is so important, and it needs to be, I think you've given a great talk and fundamented the importance of this subject. My question is, because I'm actually in the midst of developing research in the UK at Leicester, in the narrative sector, of, you know, of bringing, you know, how do you analyze, and I think it's quite important, the research you're doing with the experience,
Sure.
you know, and that you're just in the beginning of it, because it's fundamenting the reason of implementing these sort of technologies in the museum space, or even beyond it.
Yeah.
You know, okay, you've got the internet, as you were saying, it's not 3D or you don't have that possible. It's difficult. It's taking the museum space to the. I mean, you just it's beginning that.
I mean,
my question is, you were saying that you're just beginning to analyze the experience, you know, real time. There is that possibility.
Yeah, definitely. So we started actually doing that in 2006, but it was all paper-based. Yeah.
Exactly.
So now we've shifted those concepts of trying to get at socialization and embodiment into a digital format. What's so great about that is with 10 iPad minis, you can collect 120 surveys an hour. It's like phenomenal.
Yeah.
And because we're aggregating and visualizing in real time as well, you get this very powerful tool for museums. So they can log in They can make their own questions. We have a set of very gorgeous, squishy graphic things that do nice things, which they can choose from, or they can commission their own. So they become a partner, which allows them to really fine-tune their survey. And then the reporting is really, really important. So it has to be able to spit out reports that allow the person that initiated the survey to annotate, because they have particular things in mind when they're asking particular questions. It has to be completely modular, and it has to be able to spit out the director's report and the educator's report and whatever else it's supposed to cover. So it does all of those kinds of things.
And is the experience, what the feedback from your research, is the digital experience more experienceable, let's say, than the actual experience? Are people really enjoying more the digital experience?
Versus other things?
Yes.
We don't do the versus so much. We do whole exhibitions, which might have digital components in it, but they don't get tested independently. And one thing that occurred to me as you were talking is this desire by museum curators in general. They're in an immersive experience and they go, but how come there are no labels? Why isn't that site, you're going through Place Humpy, why isn't it labeled? And this is really, really fundamental, this kind of, the way it turns on and off different parts of your brain, and to be fully immersed is actually to be outside of the realm of reading, because it puts in a different kind of mindset or physical being. So that certainly is a question that I get a lot. So it's fine to have labels and posters and whatever you like outside, but as soon as you start to label immersive experiences and to treat them in a didactic way, the whole thing breaks down, and it's really obvious. We've got this work here. We've got a version, you flick the iPad and it will turn on labels describing everything that's in the painting. You think, oh, that's really great, but in fact it's really not. It's in 3 languages, so we've got it in Chinese and French and English. And if we're installing this in a museum, they will want that when they see it, they don't want it afterwards. So it's quite interesting. The other thing is the way in which these works are treated. If this work in particular, or not in particular, but is one example where it's the same data set as the 360, just hasn't got all the animations and everything, but that's a much more didactic work. Whereas this they see as an artwork in its own right. So they're able to program it in a completely different way, because it's not trying to tell a story, it is an artwork in its own right. So that difference between what is didactic and what is informational versus what is the experience of art in general.
I think you've got different levels going on when you enter into the space, haven't you?
Absolutely.
The experience itself and the information on different levels.
Yeah, and they should be kept separate. The idea that, that's the biggest problem with multimedia in museum, is everybody tries to stuff everything into one application, and it's a disaster. It's a horrible user experience. Yeah.
No, thank you very much.
Hello. I just want to put you 2 questions. The first one is, what we've seen here, it's state-of-the-art cameras, just to film and to do the projections afterwards. Is it possible to do it retrospectively? I'm thinking about Palmyra in Syria, which probably will be destroyed, or most probably will be destroyed. Is it possible to gather whatever was already, what exists already, and put it up together and do something like this?
So there's a lot of work done in 2D to 3D conversion. So that's creating a 3D movie from a 2D movie, potentially. So all these sophisticated kind of algorithms for dealing with images are just booming. Yeah. So it's a big area where you can start to reconstruct and also to texture the reconstruction of Palmyra. So there would be a number of ways of going about it, or whether you want an experience that really takes the archive that's existing and use it in a novel way, in a sort of experiential, embodied way, like some of those data browsers. That would be another approach. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of digital reconstruction per se. you know, where you take a model and you paint textures on the wall. They can be really lifelike, but somehow I'm not that keen on them. It's something to, yeah, anyway, it's just a personal point of view. But taking existing site and augmenting it somehow could work. Why is it going to be destroyed?
Palmyra in Syria.
Oh, in Syria, yeah,
Yes.
sure.
Yes. I mean, it's now
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
occupied.
yeah. I know,
It will disappear. It's,
I know. Yeah, there's been some utter, just unbelievable things happen in the last few weeks. Really.
My second question was, I don't know if it's your personal experience, but why are we talking only about the East? I mean, we have China, we have mainland China, we have Hong Kong, we have...
That's where I've been living. So
what
I've been
about the
living in
US?
Hong Kong.
What about the US?
So the US is really conservative for a start, but they like to take these works, but they have a fascination with Asia also. But I'm a maritime archaeologist, so I've been working in the Indian Ocean region for my entire career, so that's why pretty much everything is done in Asia, because that's where I'm where my network is. Yeah, it's accident.
Hello, thank you very much for your talk. It was really wonderful. Not only the research that is involved, but also the real implementations of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I have lots of questions. I will not ask you everything, because I have also very technical questions. You started to say that museums are still not very open to these VR implementations.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, you show lots of them.
Mm-hmm,
I also was curious about this geographical, if for instance, you said that America is very conservative, but also Europe, you didn't show things about Europe.
Yeah, I guess as an archaeologist, because I'm an archaeologist, maritime archaeologist, so I used to dig up shipwrecks, and the beat that I was on from West Australia was Oman, China, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Cambodia. It was all those kind of areas, and that's where I've continued to work. And then I was living in Hong Kong, and so then the whole China thing. China also is like very, very hungry for this. And so there's endless opportunities and more desire to be working in digital heritage specifically. And they've got lots of money, and they're really experimental in a way. They've got some quite radical ideas, or they enjoy radical ideas as well. And so it's been quite easy to make works there, yeah. And to get funding for them also, which is, I mean, one just hangs out where the money is, right? Yeah.
Okay, I have another question. This is more technical. The things that you show are all based in in-house technologies, or do you use also some market technologies, open source, or probably the mixture of everything, because you have lots of things
it's
that
a
are
mixture of everything. So in terms of software engineers, they are everywhere. So in Europe and America and here and wherever, Australia, China, and the main sort of software architecture for a long time was just military software, because there was nothing that could do that. And it's all C++ coding, blah, 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 completely proprietary, undocumented, and not shareable. But more recently, things like Unity 3D and Middle VR, I mean, and immersive view, these things can finally cluster. But it's not straightforward. So those are more open source, but not really, yeah. So it's a pretty proprietary world, and it's very idiosyncratic, yeah. So we tend to work more on the idea of a paradigm. So we're creating paradigms that might be copyable, and certainly we can replicate machines and we can replicate works, no problem at all. So for instance, the AV machine, I think there's been 24 of them sold worldwide, and we do works on all of them, and they tour and they get installed on different machines, and it's a bit of mucking around, but it always works, yeah.
So just a last question.
Yes.
Because one of the things that you show an augmented reality when you point the tablet to a white room. There was a mother and two kids. So that is not really.
Right.
I don't know. You use shape recognition because that's not a marker. That's not GPS, or is it?
You're talking about the Oculus.
Yeah. Oh, okay. She was with the Oculus.
She had the Oculus on.
Okay,
Yeah.
so she's tracking.
And
okay.
she's tracked twice. So she's tracked with a Connect, and
Okay.
she's also tracked with a Leap Motion. So that detects her arms. She can see her arms and body or whatever. If she looks at her legs, they will be there. So 2 different types of tracking.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thanks.
More questions? Okay.
Hi, thank you for your work, very exciting. I have a question regarding the techniques. It's not very technical, but the techniques, which I saw, the panorama, the Oculus, the tablets. What do you reckon in terms of experience for the user, for the final user, is not the best, but the most natural? And what do you reckon the difference are in terms of expenses as well, and why we should use one instead of the other?
Sure. I'll show a picture, and that will help. In fact, this picture will do. I don't know how clear it is, but down the bottom on the far right, at the bottom of the screen, is the platform called Place, and it's the one where it's motorized in the middle and you're moving a point of view, right? This is a really, really rock solid success. Anybody can use it. They understand how to use it just by kind of being there. And the idea that you're moving a field of view strongly sort of implies navigation and also concentration and traveling and things like that. In the AV system, where it's all around you, right, it's completely different because anybody could be looking anywhere because everything is available to see. It's extremely, it's more difficult to make a point of view in that sense. So it's much more omnipresent than something that you are navigating, and you are clearly defining that navigating not only for yourself but for everybody else. So that's a really strong difference in those machines. So the other thing about what's useful and usable, what machine is best for different types of data, so we're really interested in being able to show things at scale or as close to real scale, so that's really important. And obviously some machines, they do hemispheres, but the panorama doesn't do a hemisphere, or not nicely. You can show the ceiling, but it doesn't look nice. So it's a whole range of different responses to particular situations. And we design machines to fit content, in a sense, yeah? The reactor system, which is where you're walking around and you're looking in, this is really, really good for performances. It's like a stage where you want to be able to see from all angles, and you can imagine anything in it. If you want to have a lot of people, then it's no longer one-to-one scale, but you get the idea, yeah. So that's like an aquarium, essentially. And the relative cost, you wanted?
No, I'm saying, why would you use, for example, a panorama view instead of maybe cheaper solution as a Oculus or?
Resolution, fidelity, numbers of people, usability, million reasons why I wouldn't use an Oculus, yeah? It's fine for, I guess, distributed, isolated, in your living room kind of experiences. And it will have a real power there. But I'm much more interested in the places where people come together.
So multi-user.
So yeah. multi-being anyway. Yeah, because many of it are single user, but that in itself creates a really interesting play between the user performing and the change of people as they take over, and they do it in a really democratic way. Yeah, so that's the kinds of experiences that I'm interested in. I really like scale, big sort of scale. Yep.
Okay. I have like a small related question. What would you reckon the museum should be? I mean, we should still using should still be using devices where you actually have a device, or totally free experience with content being just throwing at you as some, you know, some.
Yeah. So I guess it's about experience versus information, so that the device can provide information layers. It can do it really nicely. But what these are is quite different. They are pure experience in that sense. And so even though you get a lot of information by going into them, and they can be led by docents who give more information, I think they both have their place. Yeah. But this device will probably, I mean, that will disappear because it will be smart labels and, you know, whatever, a whole bunch of other things. And I think that's what the CEO of Intel was getting at, that all of these peripheral things are going to move away to a kind of ubiquitous computing scenario. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay.
I was just curious about something else. Other senses, are you exploring other senses rather than just
smell
like
and all
smell,
that?
temperature, or tangible interfaces or something? Like
Yeah.
that?
So we do, I've just involved in a grant, I'm not leading it, where it's called the Sensorama or something, where they're really interested in smell and also very abstract visualization and other kinds of like pulsing of the world to create sensation. Yeah. So certainly it's possible. Often when we show, especially works from India, everyone says, well, where's the smell, you know, things like that. And synthetic smell is huge. In terms of tangible, a lot of these devices are interactive in one way or another, but I guess the place device where you're actually physically moving this whole platform it's a pretty thrilling thing to be doing. So that, I think, is a very strong tangible interface, as is the tablet, the window on the world is super physical, and that also is very thrilling for people to reveal the world themselves like that.
Anyone else? Oh? Well, I have a question for you, Sarah. You know, digital tools, apart from gathering and displaying a huge amount of data, they are creating, as we've seen with your paper in several projects that you showed, they are creating a different relationship between the public, the audience, and the object, and also they are creating new kinds of interaction, social interaction, having the art, cultural heritage, and art objects as the leitmotif. And that's what I'm really interested in, because I think we are witnessing a complete revolution as far as it regards the ontological value of our relationship with the past and the heritage, cultural heritage. I would like just to know your views on this, and what's your experience on this as well.
So I think when I started my talk, I just did that little micro overview of more recent history, so 200 or 300 years, but the history of artificial ways of seeing the world and the past have been around for a really long time. So I think that we are fascinated by this ability to manipulate the real and create something new and other. And that might be the past, or it might be, fantasy land. But that desire has been here for a long time, and we just have new tools to do it with. And if you look at the history, it's not a linear history, of course, but it's a kind of patchwork of these innovations, like the invention of the panorama, but it goes back all the way to automata, which can be, a BC type invention. So there is a whole repertoire there, and I don't know that we're witnessing something really new. I just think that we're becoming more aware of it, and it's distributed more. And also our orientation is to research it. The public, I'm not sure how much they do. I mean, they've got their gadgets, but whether that's a revolution for the way in which they see culture or heritage is another matter. I think it's still quite a small world of stuff going on. It's really interesting like that.
Yeah, well, I was, thank you. I was thinking not only, well, if we look at your presentation, like those animated figures, dancers within an object that doesn't have that, that's one side of the question, but there are several other sides of the question, because these digital tools are creating digital data that's it's not original, it's another one.
Sure,
yeah,
absolutely.
And also the way we view it, it's not just different in a singular and personal experience, but in a collective and social experience, as we've seen that. Because that device, I can't recall it, that we can see what's in the wall with the device, and that's wonderful, and that's a completely different experience we have with.
So I think the history of interactivity in museums is about breaking down the isolation of individuals and having a collective experience, and that's where the sudden plethora of mobile device kind of applications, which does nothing to create socialization, is a real tragedy and a lost opportunity for museums, I reckon.
Yeah.
Because really we've got these incredibly powerful modalities or paradigms that have a long history, and that we could, act on those that bring people together. And the studies of museums about how people interpret artworks is in the conversation between two people, not what's written on the wall. So the label is almost irrelevant. Having good books is really important, or good websites or whatever, but in the experience, it's much more to do with socialization than anything else. Yeah.
I completely agree with you, and that was my main point. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your wonderful talk. I was wondering, you started with a brief panorama about the ways that in the past people were constructing devices to look differently for the objects in museums, and all the projects that you show us are something very similar to that, in a digital way, of course, but very similar to that. But as those previous ways, or those previous machines built for that purpose disappeared, or are now forgotten, not used. What you and your team and the people that are involved in these kind of projects think or are doing about the preservation of this kind of thing? Because a few years from now, this will be museum objects.
Yeah, sure. If we're lucky.
And there is a problem about the preservation of this digital data that we are collecting and we are producing. I don't know if you can talk about
I think
a
there's
little bit of
two aspects to that. Is a massive rise in what are called media archaeologists. Yeah, so there are these people who now, mainly art historians, who are researching the whole history of what could be considered media all the way back to automata. So very, very early stuff all the way through. So that's one side of that, is that there is a sudden interest in that whole history, and that's quite new in academia. And the other side is, of course, digital curation side. So for our works, there are several things. We are not trying to preserve the code that runs these machines because it's incredibly idiosyncratic, and our coders don't document anything, so that's whatever. Because we film it a lot. All the original assets are of the highest quality, so we've got massive servers which back up all this original data. So with those two things and the stuff that we write, etc., you could theoretically recreate the work, but we're not trying to preserve the code ourselves because we don't have those kind of resources. And the documentation of media works like this is really useful for when they're looking at restaging some of the older media artists' works. So long as they were well documented, they can actually put them together more or less, but using new projectors and new computers and whatever else it is. It's the paradigm that you're looking at, and potentially that raw material which has to be rebuilt. You have to rebuild that work. It would be very, very difficult to do it any other way. It would mean keeping vast rooms full of machines and computers running. It's not feasible. Yeah. Yeah, that's about where I'm at with that.
Okay, can I just put one more question?
Yeah.
Because as an historian, I'm a historian of the 19th century, so I don't deal with this. I deal with the 19th century digitally, but not with the present time. But 50 years from now, 100 years from now, people, my future colleagues, are going to be studying the present day and the social experience of people.
Yep.
And you are collecting information about the social experience of people.
And writing about it.
If you don't preserve that information...
Yeah. So we write and publish about that. So, and that digital information, that recording of particular experiences, that is also a digital storage system. It's a database. But the problem one always faces is the longevity of this within an institutional context. So is the university really going to care? Are they going to keep my website alive? I doubt it. So there is a database. It exists somewhere. Somebody will try and find it. It's very problematic unless libraries are able to. University libraries, for instance, would collect this material. But we also are working in so many hybrid contexts, and so our work is with agreements with all sorts of World Heritage Site owners, and they ostensibly own the data, and we just license it, even though we take it. In the case of the Dongguan Academy, they gave it to us, they did it. But in many other cases, we generate the material, but it's owned by somebody else on paper. But they will have lost their digital files a long time ago because they have no capacity to look after it. So there's all of that. So there's a whole bunch of rights agreements as well which go with this, and also the scanning of high-res scanning, where each image, it can be 90 gigabytes for a single file or something like that, and or a single object might be that much. And so I've just had this experience with this scroll painting where the museum, it was only 2 years ago, they've already lost their data. And it's just phenomenal. They paid $10,000 for it and they've lost it already. So there's a real disconnect in many, many levels. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Not an easy question.
Just one last question. Actually, it's two. Sorry. The first is the fact that digital tools have this powerful effect on approaching knowledge from different perspectives. People, they are actually fostering collaborative work between different researchers, different experts, and it is really important for research, for scientific research, and I would like to know your experience on this. And the other thing is that the fact that we are mixing virtuality with reality, that has an impact of human behavior, has to have, and we are approaching this stage that the virtual and the real are getting more and more blurred. And I know there are some studies on the impact of that on humans. There are studies, being developed with neuroscientists on this. I would like to know if you have any experience on this.
So museum experience is so, I guess, fragmentary in your daily life. It's a special experience. But of course, the anecdotal stuff that you hear or read about the impact of, mobile phones and kids that watch screens all day, or that rewiring of the brain, or the effects that, too many shoot-'em-up games have on young boys and what they choose to do in their lives and things like that. I think it's all really true. So then the responsibility is to create works that are somehow uplifting and creating good humans, potentially. Certainly, I think that's a valid thing. But it doesn't mean that everything has to be pretty, if you know what I mean. Yeah.